You're listening to Supervision with a Vision, where we discuss all things supervision. I'm your host, Sarah, professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, play therapist, eating disorder specialist, and cookie lover, with my co-host, Heather, marriage and family therapist, certified Together in Texas counselor, a Texas transplant from California, and outdoor adventurer. Hi, welcome to Supervision with a Vision. Today, Heather and I are talking about the overuse of labels. This week we read Let's Stop Calling Each Other Narcissist, published in Psychology Today 2023. Heather, we're talking about the overuse of lots of kinds of labels, but our article is about narcissism.
Right.
So the first point that the article makes is that actually diagnosis or labeling is very, very complex.
Right. It is more than just a list of symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a list of symptoms can be all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not skilled at knowing or differentiating between them, you can just slap a label on anything.
Yeah.
I think that's a big misnomer kind of in our society. Like sometimes people are like, they need a label, and then sometimes they don't want the label. It's like there's this push and pull.
Yeah, definitely. I am thinking, it's been a while now, but when the DSM was revised this most recent time, the DSM-5 text revision.
Right.
And now for our listeners that aren't in the United States, the ICD-10 is very interwoven with the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. There always is a lot of complaint that it's not perfect or people don't like it. It isn't really meant to be the be all end all. You can't read the book and just, so then there you go. Now that's it. Now you know how to do it. Now that, you know, it makes it simple. Mm-hmm. It's so complex.
Right. People are dynamic. There's lots of things that could cause someone to have a certain behavior that maybe isn't like internal at all. Could be outside things that are causing it.
And you're saying there are people who want a label or don't want a label, that even that part of it is layered and complex.
Yeah, very complex.
Or maybe they like part of what the label does for them, but they don't like another part of what the label does for them. Thinking about the complexity of a label or a diagnosis, can you think of what the layers are that contribute to not just a diagnosis, but a label? And when we say label, what can we think of an example of what we're talking about?
I mean, I think in supervision, right? You and I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
I call my baby supervisees or my, very green interns, anyway like that. I mean, we are labeling when we do that.
Yeah.
But it's a way to, everyone knows that means they're early on in their things.
I think even using counselor as a label.
Oh, yeah.
That just does not do justice to all of the different expertise, experience, years or days, times of experience. I mean, the label just doesn't do it justice.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're thinking about a label, what are all the layers that might contribute to how you end up labeling somebody?
I think one might be just your personal experience. So you are in a situation, I worked at a clinic one time where almost every kiddo there that came through had at minimum an ADHD diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And I did not like that. It didn't feel right. It didn't, but sure, if you read the list of behaviors, okay. We can make that fit. But there was always something else that was under it that was causing it. But did their labels look correct? Sure. But after working there for a while, I started realizing that I was doing it and saying every kid here has trauma, which probably was true. But that at the time was not a trauma is popular right now. Right. It was not at the time.
Right.
So I think it's easy to see once you're kind of immersed in it, you start to think in the same pattern as...
So, environment.
Right.
Okay, the environment you're in, the environment the person that's getting labeled is in.
Right.
We already said time. Mm-hmm. It could be years of experience or time spent with exposure maybe. To something. What about culture?
Yeah.
Like, if we're talking even about the label of using the label of a counselor, calling
Mm-hmm.
yourself a counselor, calling somebody
Mm-hmm.
else a counselor. When I don't know, how do you, that sounds funny. How do you identify? But when, like in mixed company or not with me, when somebody says, "What do you do for a living?" or even like, "What do you put on your tax form?" What do you call yourself? Do you call yourself a therapist, a
I
counselor,
tend to say
something?
therapist, I think. I was thinking about it as you were
Mm-hmm.
talking. I was like, I tend to say therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really funny is a couple of times before I've continued, someone has like either interrupted or said something and they're like, oh, respiratory therapist. And I'm like,
Yes.
no.
Well, right, that's what I was going to say is that when I say counselor, people often will say like a financial
Right.
counselor. And I'm like, that's
No.
no. And that's a weird jump. Or in Texas, there is another professional that uses the same acronym
Mm-hmm.
LPC.
Mm-hmm.
And it has something to do with real estate.
Oh, yes. Property, something. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So I've said LPC sometimes in situations, and people will then fill in
Right.
that
What their brain
that they
has.
assume I'm doing something with real estate. Or I have heard respiratory therapist, which I always think, really? I don't even know that many respiratory therapists. That's an interesting
It's
application because I would think physical
right. Physical
or
therapist. Right.
occupational
Could be all sorts of things.
or speech, but
Right.
you went to
Mm-hmm.
respiratory.
Yep.
Huh, that's
Interesting.
interesting.
Okay.
So people fill in based on their
Right.
experience what
What they
they
think. Right.
counselor, therapist, what they think that means we're
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think within our profession that we use those two labels based on our experience.
Yeah, I bet you're, yeah, I think that's
That
right.
I think if I, in a professional setting, that I probably say counselor most often,
Mm-hmm.
though I could certainly call myself a therapist. That would
Right.
be
It's
allowed.
the same. Yeah.
But if I'm in a situation related to academics or
Mm-hmm.
academia, I say counselor.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it just depends on the setting a
Right.
little bit. So
Right.
back to environment.
Right. So I think so many things kind of go into why our brain
Mm-hmm.
labels something, but then also why other people. I've had, people come in for sessions and they're like, I have anxiety. And I'm like, great. Like, who diagnosed you?
Yes.
And then they're like,
Yes.
they start talking and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, that sounds more like depression. Like I start like
Right.
assessing pretty quickly. But when they come in with an idea of what they already have labeled themselves.
Right. That makes me think of two kids and teenagers that I'm dealing with right now, working with. And one really is connected to their ADHD diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
And I asked the teenager and parents,
Mm-hmm.
like basically who diagnosed you. And the history of that is a teacher said so.
Oh,
And then we went to the family doctor and said the teacher said so. And now the family doctor prescribes a medication because
the
the
teacher said.
teacher said so.
Right.
I don't think that kid has ADHD at all.
Right. And really,
I think
mm-hmm.
they have anxiety.
Yeah.
And then I have another kid. It was kind of a fun thing last night, actually. I was talking to a teenager, and the teenager perfectly described anxiety. And I said, "You do know that's anxiety, right?" And they said, "Oh, I thought that was stress."
Oh.
And I said,
Well,
"Well, I think
okay.
that's a different, like another word for
Mm-hmm.
anxiety for some people. I mean, everybody has some stress and everybody has anxiety to a degree, but this is different." And after talking about it for just a minute or two, he went, "Oh, that changes things.
Right.
That makes so much sense. Why didn't I ever think of it like that?" And I mean, just a paradigm shift for him
Right.
to
I
think about it in just a slightly different way.
Right. I think we talked about this a little bit before we started recording today that culture affects so much of what we do. And I said, yeah, anytime 2020 runs a mental health story,
Mm-hmm. Then we're going to have a slew
yep,
of,
whatever it is,
yeah.
could be anything. For a while, when they were playing around with bipolar 3 or
Yes.
oh,
Well,
guess what?
I feel like I was pretty new out of school and this could be very regional or
Right.
related to location, but I feel like in the United States, not long after I finished graduate school, everyone was diagnosed. Young kids were being diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Yeah, ridiculously so.
And I'm like, oh, maybe they're just 4.
Right.
Maybe that's just what a 4-year-old looks like.
Right. Maybe it's okay to have good and bad emotions at the same time because you're a kid and you're figuring it out.
Or that to have strong emotions that change quickly.
Right.
Or to make decisions that feel impulsive. That all describes like a 4-year-old.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too, to remember, like, what is feeding you? Like, what information, did you just finish doing a complete, like, study on something and now you're seeing it everywhere, right?
Yeah. The next point in the article was that labels keep us from seeing people clearly, which also the kid that I'm working with right now that was so connected to or tied to the ADHD diagnosis, and it's really not serving them. Right. It's not helping them to reach at steps that might help them or make situations more functional for them. That I think it's a mislabel that keeps them from seeing themselves clearly, from their parents or other professionals seeing them clearly. But can you think of other examples where a label just keeps us from seeing people?
I think I have a couple of different experiences where, like, in a clinic-based setting, the kids are coming there for a specific reason, or adults are coming in for a specific reason. So they might have something, I mean, we can use eating disorders as an example, but they might be coming in for one thing because they believe they have that, and the staff there is doing that thing. Yes. And then I had a situation recently where my supervisee went, but it's not that, it's this. I know it is, like, very confidently, like, it is not that. And it took a little while for the rest of the team to get on board, but eventually that, client needed to be transferred out to some other level of care. But that's, when you have a label, it blocks sometimes from getting to know all the details.
Yeah. I'm thinking, that's something I think is really important within eating disorder treatment. I think it happens less often, but it still happens. How many times a family doctor sees someone with an eating disorder, but they don't end up diagnosing because that person is male, older, whatever doesn't fit
normal,
what they think the label is of an eating disorder. But even the more nuanced, which I'm thinking, I know your supervisee works in an eating disorder setting. What if you're working with someone and it looks like an eating disorder, but the more you look at it, it really is actually OCD?
Right.
Or the other way around.
Other way around, right. We could do both.
But wouldn't the treatment or the steps towards helping that person would just look very different?
They're not incongruent with whatever that, program is doing. So I think that's important to, even when we get clients that come in, and it's important for our supervisees to know that, like, always do, even if they're coming in with what they already are telling you, like, do your own assessment.
Yeah.
Don't.
Ooh, what about, I actually had a good moment in supervision, maybe it's been a month ago now, where my supervisee used the word resistant.
Okay.
Isn't that, that by itself is a label. And I think it's kind of a cruddy label that I try to get people to avoid using. But in my supervision, I said, try and describe the same thing, but use more words. Instead of saying resistant, how else could you describe this? And my supervisee was stumped for a second and thought about, like eyes looking up and thinking, kind of stumped, and then said, my client is scared. Oh. And I went, oh,
that's so different.
Oh, that's so good. And man, I think you nailed it. And now don't you understand, relate to, know to respond to your client in a different way than if you're calling them resistant.
Right.
And my supervisee was like, oh yeah. Okay.
It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. That a scared client is different than oppositional or client who's being a jerk.
Right. Or avoidant.
Right.
Or, kind of some negative connotations there. Scared is very different.
Okay. So labels can sometimes keep us from seeing people clearly. And then our last point is that a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Right. How does that relate to labeling or mislabeling people?
Well, I think going back to the very beginning when we talk about this list, right? When we're supposed to diagnose people with something, like something has to be, they need a sticker that has a name. But does it really matter if you get to, like, if someone's been misdiagnosed, right? And it is anxiety instead of ADHD and, something like that. it's still, their behaviors are still their behaviors.
Right.
There's still things that have to change. There are certain elements of it that are all the same anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's still struggling. Someone still needs to change things in their life.
Yeah. So does that mean the label is completely unimportant?
No. Just, it can help guide us the right direction.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe it guides us the wrong direction, and that's how we figure it out.
Yeah. I think when I'm teaching diagnosis, I will acknowledge that our system of diagnosis is not perfect.
Correct.
And then say that a large part of our system of diagnosis or labeling or whatever we want to call it is that it's a way that we can communicate with each other. It's still not perfect, but it's our system of communication. Right. So like a rose by any other name could be, I mean, it's a flower and it smells good. That actually describes a lot of things.
Right.
That, you know, so maybe anxiety versus ADHD, unfocused, fidgety.
Right.
Could be either of those things.
Right.
That you're saying sometimes the description helps you to know what the next step is or helps you to know your action step. But maybe sometimes the label is just for purpose of communication or like helping people know what we're talking about.
Right.
But the thing that you do isn't necessarily always dependent on the label.
Right. I think it's also important sometimes to not label it. Or sometimes I think it, depending on the client and depending on the diagnosis, I think it's important sometimes clients don't know their diagnosis.
Yeah. I have a client who I probably would, if I was really pushed to it, would probably label with anxiety as well as an eating disorder. And at one point they said to me, I have an eating disorder? And then we talked about it, but I also eventually said, and now what difference does that make?
Right. Why does that
mean? Do you and I do something different now because we've talked about this? Or do you do something different at home because we've now talked about this? Or actually we were already talking about food in your body and we were talking about anxious reactions, and sometimes those were about food and body, but sometimes they weren't. And I think that client came to a point where they went, well, no, I guess we don't.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
But I think a rose by any other name would smell as sweet does lend itself to what we're saying, that yes, we'll make mistakes.
Right. Right. We're not going to always get it right. And our clients won't get it right.
Well, is that a lesson for our supervisees that we need to tell them a rose by any other name smells as sweet? So if you label with anxiety and you get to know the person a little bit better, and then you change that to something different or something more specific, does that mean that you totally blew it? You messed up?
Not at all.
That's kind of like part of the process.
Right. That's part of the process. That's what makes you a good diagnostician.
Well, I think being open to the fact that it can be changed because it is complex.
Right. It's very
makes
complex.
You a good diagnostician or a good clinician.
And just because somebody comes in with a label and says, I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was 17 and now they're 30, well, it doesn't mean that it's anxiety, right? Like they've had 15 more years behind them that may not be anxiety at all.
Yeah. I think that's a hard lesson for supervisees.
It's really hard.
That we make mistakes, and sometimes it's not even a mistake, it's that things change, the situation changes. But that diagnosis or labeling is so complex. I feel like the last time I taught diagnosis, that was a really hard lesson for new counselors to learn.
Right.
Because they really wanted to get it right.
Right.
But getting it right doesn't mean never changing your mind.
Correct.
That's hard.
Right. Learning to have that flexibility.
Well, that feels like a big lesson. But Heather and I would love to hear about a time when you gave a label that ended up not being the perfect fit. We'd also love to hear your ideas about new episodes. And as always, thanks for listening to Supervision with a Vision.